Welcome to The Outlet, an OTG production.
Welcome to the NBA Outlet, presented by OTGBasketball.com. Parth Goradia is back. Diesing-Fay is here. John Aiello is out with a cold. I think it's the flu game for him. But John won't be here. But Nick, what's going on?
Nothing much, Parth. Same old stuff. Getting ready for the Western Conference and Eastern Conference Finals.
Yeah, I wanted to quickly mention before we get rolling. I really enjoyed the Civil War part of the podcast last week. I wasn't here for that, but I enjoyed listening to it. And I actually saw Civil War twice this week. So did you happen to see it?
I did see it. It was great. I loved it. That's awesome that you saw it 2 times, and I'm kind of jealous.
Yeah, it was everything Dawn of Justice was not, which was good. So I'm kind of bummed that Dawn wasn't what I thought it would be. It wasn't great, but Civil War kind of made up for it.
Well, and Civil War is kind of awesome because I feel like it's really setting up for a lot of Marvel movies going forward. So I'm pretty excited about it. You know, they had a lot of characters in there, which I thought was great.
Yeah, for sure. All right, Nick, before we get to our conference finals previews and picks, and we're going to try to answer T-Mac's question of, is the NBA watered down? I wanted to start off with just a recap of the second round. Oklahoma City, San Antonio. Oklahoma City 1-6. What did you like about the series? What did you not like? Any other thoughts?
I can tell you right now, I'm still surprised OKC won Game 6 in the fashion that they did. I mean, OKC is a great team, but I did not expect them to win like that. I know the Spurs made it close at the end, but I didn't happen to see the first half of the game. I got it at work, saw the second half score, and I was like, oh my God, I was amazed. So I give a lot of props to OKC, and I've said this before. When Durant and Westbrook are cooking, it's hard to stop, and then you got Steven Adams bothering everybody. So definitely, I think it's going to be a great series with the Warriors.
Yeah, I believe you picked San Antonio to win in 6. I picked San Antonio to win in 7. I am personally happy that I was wrong because I really wanted to see this OKC Golden State Warriors matchup. The shot making is incredible. But I agree with you. Like, I didn't expect OKC to win the way they did in that elimination game. The series was a classic. A lot of missed calls. Of course, the whole last 13 and a half seconds of game 2, I think it was, with the waiter's elbow from out of bounds and Manu stepping on the line and just fouls everywhere. I thought that was – I'm happy, first of all, I'm happy that there was not a call in that situation because the last 13 seconds were super exciting. And a lot of times these games, the last 20 or the last 30 to 20 to 30 seconds, you got one team fouling, the other team shooting free throws, and that's kind of how the game ends. So I'm happy it was just a free-flowing, just chaotic end to that game. But the series was really good. It wasn't quite as good as the Clippers and the Spurs of last year in that 7-game series classic, but it was really fun to watch, and I'm happy that these two met up, and I'm happy OKC is moving on.
Yeah, I'm happy about it. Like you said, I didn't pick them to win, but I wanted them to win as well. So it's nice to see Kevin Durant and Westbrook go to the next round. They're probably 2 of the most exciting players in the NBA. I know you really like Westbrook. I really like Durant, so I'm kind of really hoping for the OKC upset.
Yeah, me too. But Golden State's tough, man, and their matchup with Portland was really fun to watch too. I think some of the best games of these playoffs were played in this series, and no one would have ever thought that going into the season for the Trailblazers. They did get a little lucky in terms of Chris Paul and Blake being out. They might have not been in this situation if it weren't for that, but I can't complain about what the Blazers did when they got there. They didn't win. They only won 1 game, but the games that were played, they were tight. They're really fun to watch. Lillard and McCollum are going to be great going forward. Just got to work on that defense and just maybe take some less tough shots, maybe some more easy shots going forward. But, man, those 2 dudes can play.
Yeah, they're definitely fun to watch. I am definitely surprised Portland. I definitely wouldn't have thought they would be in the second round of the playoffs. And they played hard. They lost the series, but it was also nice to see some of the Warriors players step up with Curry injured. Clay had some nice games. Draymond Green was awesome to watch. So I really enjoyed that series a lot, even though it ended kind of quick.
Did you watch the Curry comeback game?
Yeah, that was amazing.
I
That
was so tired that day. I fell asleep here on the East at around 10 o'clock, so I missed the entire game. And when I woke up the next morning, I was like, oh my God, what did I miss?
it's kind of ridiculous. It's just ridiculous. And you could tell the ankle was bothering Curry. I remember watching some of his shots earlier in the game, and I'm like, wow, this guy is kind of like leaning forward a lot on his jump shots, and he's still able to put a performance like that. And to score that amount of points in overtime in such little time and put your team for the win, that was just awesome. I'll probably never forget that.
Yeah, I'm bummed that I didn't get to see it, but of course, you can watch it on playback.
There you go.
I'll probably do that at the end of the season after the finals are over. I'll need to check that game out. Moving on to the East, the most boring series I've ever watched, Miami and Toronto. Toronto just beat Miami in Game 7 tonight. And I'm actually, as a Miami Heat fan, I'm kind of happy about it in the sense that Miami didn't really stand a chance against Cleveland without Chris Bosh, and now you want to factor in Hassan Whiteside being banged up with a sprained MCL. I think it's good for Miami that they didn't go forward. I wouldn't want to see a Whiteside try to rush back and possibly hurt himself and derail his chances of getting a max contract this summer, even if that means he's not with Miami. He's done enough to earn his keep in the league, and if he did get hurt, it would have really altered his plans. So I'm happy for Whiteside that he didn't get to rush back and play and risk further injury. So, but the Miami Heat were up and down all year. They could score in bunches, and they could also go on these crazy droughts. So that was the Miami Heat roller coaster. But overall, probably a disappointing season. But they did find two gems in Josh Richardson and Justice Winslow in the draft. So it's good, solid role player building blocks to move forward with.
Yeah, definitely. Those two players are great, and they saw a lot of minutes in the playoffs. So that was nice. And you can only expect so much, when you lose a player like Chris Bosh. The one thing that was kind of annoying about this series is that Whiteside and Valanciunas both got injured, and I was really having a lot of fun watching those two battle in the paint. And I felt like by later in the series, we were probably going to see some more activity after the whistle.
Yeah, those two were scrapping it up down in the paint. And with them out, all we got were the battle of the backcourts. And both backcourts take difficult shots. And when they're not going in, it's really difficult to watch. So we got a lot of that this series. Even 4 games in, I think there were 2 or 3 overtime games. And I'm like, man, this series is going on forever. Can someone just win and move on? This was not the classic 7-game series variety. Just like Charlotte and Miami wasn't classic 7 games. Just like Toronto and Indiana wasn't classic 7 games. This series was difficult to watch. I'm happy it's over, and hopefully Toronto can put up a good fight against Cleveland and just make it entertaining for people. You don't have to win a game, just make it fun.
Yeah, I do not know if Toronto is going to be able to do that. The Cavs quietly have swept 2 teams. I think I saw a stat the other day. Kevin Love's never lost a playoff game because he got injured last year in the Boston series.
Never lost a playoff game he's played in.
Yeah, so he's never lost a playoff game he played in. I don't know. The Cavs are really interesting because it's hard to tell how good they are or how bad the East is. That 3-point game they had against the Hawks was ridiculous. And if they can kind of keep some rhythm going forward, and they'll be really confident if they sweep the Raptors. So I got my eye on the Cavs.
Yeah, I don't know if they'll be able to shoot quite like that going forward. Hopefully they can because it'd make it interesting. If they get to the finals, that is, which I think they will. But yeah, just Atlanta. I had high hopes for Atlanta this year. I think missing Splitter hurt them in a sense that they couldn't rebound, but it's not like there were rebounds to get. Cleveland was hitting everything. So that's where they were kind of killed last year. think they might have shored that up a little bit, but it didn't even matter this series. Like the Cavs just couldn't miss. And that bodes well for them moving forward because they have guys like Kyrie who can knock down threes, Kevin Love who can knock down threes, James Jones if he comes off the bench ever gets some run. Come on, Ty Lue, put him in the game. He can knock down threes. Channing Frye can knock down threes. J.R. Smith can knock down threes. So LeBron has a lot of options in terms of who he wants to pass it to.
Yeah, and like you said, the Hawks let me down. I thought the Hawks going into that series were going to at least give the Cavs a little bit of a challenge and maybe win a game or two, but they didn't show up. After that, I think it was game 2 beatdown with all the threes. I think they were just demoralized and didn't really have much faith after that.
They played him close, but when they were at home, but just wasn't enough. I was surprised that they didn't get a single game. I don't know where the Hawks go moving forward. A lot of them say they do want to stick together, but I think Horford's a free agent. Kent Bazemore is a free agent.
Yep.
Jeff Teague is a free agent. So if you're sitting up in the management seat, you just have a team that's lost 2 straight or both times in the last 2 years against the Cavs, and they haven't really been competitive. They've been swept both times. So I don't know if you bring back the same core and hope that they continue to grow and possibly challenge Cleveland. No one's been able to solve the LeBron puzzle in the East since like 2010. So I'm not sure what Atlanta does. They'll have some decisions to make this year.
Yeah, I think it'll be interesting for them going forward. I don't think the team they have right now can win an NBA championship, so they need to decide how they're going to get more talent or if they need to clean house and make some big moves. But I guess we'll see this summer.
We will see this summer. Let's move on to the conference finals. The first game will be tomorrow, so by the time this podcast is released, it'll be tonight, and that's OKC and Golden State. I want your pick and how many games.
Wow, this is going to be an awesome series. I feel like it'll probably be the best series of the playoffs. It might be better than the finals. I really want OKC to win, really bad, but I'm going to still have to pick Golden State in 7.
All right, for me, I wanted to pick OKC in the last round, and I went against it. So I'm going to pick them in this round. I'm a big OKC fan just because of Durant and Westbrook and their personalities and just them ethering Charlie Villanueva and the Dallas Mavericks and Mark Cuban in the press conference after they beat them. I'm a big fan of their personalities. I think Westbrook had a commercial that aired around the playoffs where it's the Air Jordan commercial where the kid's talking and the kid's like, this isn't a choir boy point guard. And who do you think he's talking about there? Steph. Guess who he's playing? Steph. So yeah, I love the persona. I love the arrogance. Steph has a little bit of it too, but it's more on the court. Like Westbrook is on the court arrogant and kind of off the court arrogant too. And I enjoy that. I'm a Kanye West fan. What can I say? So I'm going with OKC in 6. I know Bogut was hurt. I don't know if he came back.
He's questionable for game 1.
He has a hamstring injury, right?
Yeah.
So hamstrings are tough to play with. They linger. They do have Azili, but Azili's been prone to injury too. So I don't know, man. The Thunder have a big advantage on the boards. So hopefully they can punish Golden State because I think that's the way to beat them.
I hope you're right. I would love to see OKC win.
But man, like the Golden State Cleveland series sounds interesting too now that Cleveland's healthy. But let's make that pick. Cleveland, Toronto.
Oh, this is tough. I want to give Toronto. I mean, no, it's tough in the fact that I don't know how many games to pick.
Okay, fair.
yeah, it's not tough in the.
What?
I'm thinking that I'm gonna pick the Cavs in a sweep.
Wow.
I just don't think Toronto's very good. They probably should have lost in the first round.
Yeah, I was looking at some stats today, and did you know Toronto finished with 56 wins? That's one more than OKC, one less than Cleveland.
Yeah, and
you wouldn't think that just looking at the teams based off their playoff performances. You would not think that it was that close between those three. I want to pick. The smart thing is to pick Cleveland in 4 because there's nothing that says Toronto would win a game. But just for my own sanity, I want this to be closer than that. So I'm going to pick Cleveland in 5. Yeah, I know, so much closer, but still.
Drake will
If it's
appreciate
like
that.
a Cleveland in 5, the way Golden State, Portland was in 5, I'd be really happy with that.
Yeah, that would be really nice, but I don't think it's going to be that competitive.
And before I forget to mention, John, who is not here, also made his picks. He has Golden State in 7, Cleveland in 5. So a little bit different from us, but similar in a sense. We all have Cleveland. You and John have Golden State in 7. I have OKC in 6. I'm picking the upset there. And just to mention, John has gotten 5 of all the series correct, 5 of the total in terms of correct winner and correct number of games. You and Bai both have 3, so we have some catching up to do with John.
So hopefully we get some right picks this round.
Yeah, hopefully. All right, our final topic of the day. T-Mac is a regular on Rachel Nichols' The Jump on ESPN. It's actually a really good show. It's one of the better NBA shows, in my opinion. But he said in response to Steph Curry's unanimous MVP that the league is watered down. And so we wanted to take a quick look at just some seasons in the past, 4 decades? 3 decades, whatever it is. And just look at some of the stats, see if T-Mac's point is backed up by numbers. Of course, when there's numbers, there isn't always context, so we understand that a lot of this stuff, just take it for what it is. They're numbers. Can you draw a specific conclusion from it? Probably not, but it's just something interesting to look at. So the first thing I looked at were average total points for the top 10 scorers, and we used seasons 85 and 86, 95, 96, 05, 06, and of course this past year, 2015, 2016. So in 85, 86, Jordan was hurt that year, so that affects that number. But top 10 scorers averaged 2,020 points. Over 82 games is about 24.6 points per game. So that's a good baseline that we have started here. In 95, 96, it was 1,917. Over 82, that's 23.7 points per game. 05, 06, here's the interesting one. 05, 06, 2,244 points. Divide that by 82, 27.3 points per game. And this past year, 1,975 points, which averages out to 24.1 points per game. So if we want to put that in order, 05, 06, 85, 86, 15, 16, 95, 96. Any thoughts on that, or why you want to answer why you think that is the way it is?
Well, I think you could look at it 2 different ways. There's a lot more players who can score a lot of points. Or you can see the scoring is more balanced in the NBA if it's less points. You know what I mean? You could look at it as a fact that, there's more guys who can put up a lot of points, or there's just more team basketball. So it's hard to differentiate. I mean, I'm definitely 05, 06 sticks out because that's a 3-point differential almost so from all the years. So you got to think that's when T-Mac played. So I guess you could say there was a lot more potent scores then, but it's not like a huge advantage. So, I mean, I don't think it has a lot of basis to it.
Right, and the interesting thing is the top 10 scorers, some of the names that I was looking at were Kobe, Melo, LeBron, Gilbert Arenas. So those are some big time scorers that will go down in history as some of the better scorers in the league. And I was looking at, and obviously these are just for the top 10 in each year, but looking at the number of 20 points per game scorers, 25 and 30 points per game, it's not all that different. It's funny that 85, 86 had 26 players score more than 20 points per game. 5 players scored more than 25, and only 1 player scored more than 30. And the 1 player over 30 is kind of what we noticed throughout these 4 seasons. There was only 1 over 30. Like this year it was Steph. 05, 06, I believe it was Kobe. 95, 96, I'm going to go ahead and throw out MJ. I don't quite remember. But that's kind of what you get. And in the other 3 seasons that we looked at, there were 20 players over 20. And then in 95, 96, 5 players were over 25. In 05, 06, 9 players were over 25. And in 15, 16 this past year, only 6 players were over 25 points per game. So you have 3 more players 10 years ago scoring 25 points per game or more than 25 points. I think that's interesting. I don't know if it's better defense with Thibodeau making his defensive impact with the Boston Celtics in the late 2000s, or if that's just we've lost the elite scorers in the league. What do you think it is?
I mean, I think it maybe is teams nowadays aren't trying to rely as much on one player. They're trying to have more team-oriented basketball, but you had a lot of, like you mentioned, a lot of go-to scorers in 05 and 06 that really could score the basketball and they could get hot. There was a lot of guys that could do that. And maybe there's less guys that can then do that as much. But, I mean, I feel like there's still plenty of good scorers now. So I feel like there could be more guys that average 25, but it wouldn't necessarily help their team if they did that.
That's a fair point. Like that's good context behind a lot of these numbers. And I know you mentioned team basketball. The league average assists per game have gone down since 85, 86. So in that season, 85, 86, the league average was 26 assists. This is a team stat. 95, 96, 22.7. 05, 06, 20.6. And this past year, 22.3. So is it team basketball?
It seems like that in 05 and 06 that it was really a lot of ISO basketball. Maybe now we're trying to get towards more team basketball, but not like they were in 85 and 86. I mean, 4 more assists, that's pretty much 8 more points. And nowadays with all the threes, it could be even more.
At least 8 more points.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because we also looked at the average pace for all the teams in those seasons and then their offensive and defensive / defensive rating, which is the same number if you average it out for the season. But in 85, 86, they played at 102 possessions per game, and the offensive rating, which is normalized for 100, is 107 points. In 95, 96, the pace slowed way down. Just 10 years later, there were 11 less possessions per game. So the pace in 95, 96 was 91.8 possessions, but the offensive rating went up. Now, that could be because the last 8 to 9 possessions that rating is based on are just extrapolated numbers. And, of course, when you extrapolate, that's not the actual value. If the pace was up closer to 100, that might change how the offensive or defensive rating actually was. So, I mean, it didn't go up by much. It went up from 107.2 in 85, 86 to 107.6, 95, 96. The pace slowed down even further 10 years later, 05, 06. At 90 possessions per game, the offensive rating went down by a point. And this past year, the pace went up a little bit, 95.8 possessions per game. And the offensive rating is 106.4. So what do you just think that – why don't you think the pace is up at 100? Because nowadays we talk about when we compare this era to 90s basketball, it's like, oh, they're playing so much faster, they're getting out and running, but it's nowhere close to what the 80s were.
Yeah, no, this was one of the set of stats that surprised me a little bit. I'm not really sure. I mean, I guess they were just missing a lot more shots and back then, I guess, because they're having more possessions and less points, and they're just trying to, not just handle business and try to score as many points as they can. But I don't know. It's kind of tough to gauge. I mean, the one thing I keep getting is that 05 and 06, it just like slowed down. It seems like there was a lot more isolation basketball, at least from what the statistics have told me. Less assists, slower pace, but still a lot of points. And not saying that the ISO was bad, but that there was just a lot of good scorers who could do it on their own. You know what I mean? In that time. So maybe that's partially why T-Mac's been said that it was watered down, because he was just used to playing with guys who did it on their own a lot.
Could be a possibility. I know a lot of people also say, hey, I know Charles Barkley says this all the time, that we need more veterans in the league. And because of that, there's sloppier play and all that kind of stuff. So we looked at the average age in all these different seasons. In the 80s, or in the 85-86 season, it was about 26.8, 95-96, 27.5, which is one of the highest ever. 05-06 was 26.5, and this past season was 26.7. Now, of course, that doesn't always mean the age in terms of the players that are actually playing on the court, because the rotation age is probably a lot different from this age. But the average age each season in the last 30 years hasn't changed all that much.
Yeah, that was one thing that definitely surprised me when I looked at the list. I mean, yeah, they had the one jump for 1 year up, but like for the most part, it's been around 26 years old. So I thought that was interesting.
Right, and you hear it all the time that, hey, there need to be older guys in the league that kind of show you how to be a professional, show you how to conduct yourself, show you how to do the right things in terms of eating right, putting in the correct amount of time in the gym, the ice and heat, all that kind of stuff. But the average age hasn't changed that much. So I don't know about that. I don't know how I should interpret that. But I know the total amount of turnovers has gone down, and gone down every year. At the 4 years we looked at, 85-86, there were 17.8 turnovers per game, 95-96, 15.8, 05-06, 14.4, and it's the same 14.4 this past season. Of course, pace has a lot to do with that. In the 80s, they played a lot faster, so there's the possibility of more turnovers. But in 05-06, the pace was at 90, and this past season, it was at 95.8, so let's go 96. The turnovers per game remained the same. So you could argue that the game was sloppier 10 years ago.
Yeah, which I think is interesting, because now you hear a lot of people nowadays say, oh, the NBA is so sloppy, they don't take care of the basketball, but this is telling you otherwise.
And another big thing that has changed throughout these years is, of course, the three-point line, and we really got a big dose of that this year with Steph hitting over 400. So I was looking at three-point numbers. The average number of total three-pointers made by the top 10 three-point shooters in all these years. And in 85-86, the average for the top 10 was 56, which is nothing. So over 82 games, that's approximately 0.7 three-pointers made per game. In just 10 years, that went up to 204 three-pointers made as the average total for the top 10 shooters. And over 82, that's 2.5 three-pointers made per game. 05-06 went down a little bit, 193. Over 82, that's 2.3. And this year, 235, which is about three-pointers made per game. So with the addition of the three-point shot, I think the three-point line was instituted in the NBA early 80s. So obviously in 85-86, there weren't a lot of guys who grew up shooting that shot. So obviously, why would you take it in the game when it actually matters, right? But now this generation and the generation before, they've been shooting threes all their life. So of course you'd see more three-pointers made and more three-pointers made per game, and even taken per game.
Yeah, and then with the impact Steph Curry's having right now, you definitely think that number is going to keep going up.
Yeah, his number was absurd this year. There's just, you can't explain it. Some of the shots he takes are so difficult, and he still cashes them.
And he makes it look so smooth and easy, but then if you step on a basketball court and try to do the same thing that Steph Curry does, you'll just be like, damn, that guy's good.
Yeah, it takes until you try doing what he does, you can't really appreciate what he's doing. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, and he makes it look effortless. You know what I mean? It looks like he's, just another shot he's putting up. But
Right.
really, he's off balance, squaring his shoulders up. He's using a lot of upper body strength, balancing himself in the air and shooting it over somebody who's a few inches taller than him. So,
And I have a friend who always talks about, like, you know how the whole 96, 95, 96 Bulls versus this year's Warriors, that whole debate. My friend was like, man, the way that the league is set up right now, there's so many more elite teams than there were back then. I was like, really? You think it's that way? He's like, yeah, for sure. That's why the Dubs are one of the best teams, or the best team. That's why they're better. So I decided to look at average wins for the top 5 teams in all those seasons. 85, 86, top 5 teams averaged 58 wins. 95, 96, top 5 teams averaged 62 wins. 05, 06, top 5 teams averaged 59 wins. And this past year, the top 5 teams averaged 61 wins. So that's not quite true. It's like, it's pretty, like, 95, 96, of course, you had the 72 win Bulls, and that kind of brings that number up, just like this year's Warriors brings the 15-16 number up. But there's not that much difference, and 95, 96 had more elite teams in a sense.
yeah, I mean, there isn't that much of a difference. It's really hanging around that 60 number for the most part. So, and like you mentioned, the Warriors this year bringing the number up, and then I guess the Spurs too, you would say, would bring that number up. They had, 67 wins?
Yes.
So, yeah, I'm not all about this. Everybody's always trying to talk bad about the NBA nowadays. I also think it's really funny when you see like kids on Twitter that are younger than you and I, and they're trying to tell you about 90s and 80s basketball. Like,
Yeah.
bro, you weren't even born.
Yeah, I'm happy that I was not able to watch that kind of basketball, because if I'm still here doing this kind of podcast and I'm that old, shouldn't be. It's not working out for me. Life has not worked out for me. But we also looked at the average wins for the bottom 5 teams in each of those years. 85, 86, the bottom 5 won 28 games. 95, 96, the bottom 5 averaged 21 wins. In 05, 06, the bottom 5 averaged 25. And this past year, the bottom five averaged 20 wins. Now, I can't really give you that context in terms of the 80s and 90s and even 10 years ago. Did teams try to lose on purpose like some of these teams nowadays do? Is that why the bottom 5 is so low now? Which could kind of make it easier for the elite teams to win. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, no, like if you have a team like the Sixers who are obviously not trying to win at all, and you get to play them a decent amount of times, that's obviously going to have an impact on your record. You can almost mark that as wins.
Right. And in other seasons when you don't have, or even back then, I'm not quite sure if teams did do the whole tanking thing. I don't think so, because you feel like you'd be hearing it a lot, right? If teams did it back then, you wouldn't be hearing about it as much right now.
Exactly.
It'd be more traditional in a sense. So I doubt that happened. But it's interesting to look at. Like, even 95, 96, the bottom 5 averaged 21 wins. But I think that's when they also had the Toronto Raptors being a expansion team. So that could lead to that as well. So it's interesting. Like, 85, 86 had the bottom 5 teams were a lot better. I will say that. That proves they have 8 more wins than they averaged 8 more wins than they did this past year. But there were also less teams. So how that factors in, it's up to you to figure out.
Yeah, very true. That definitely has an impact. And like you said, the impact is, I don't think teams back then were trying to lose on purpose like they are nowadays. And it's not just like one team nowadays is trying to lose on purpose. I mean, you go into the season, you kind of either know that you're going to compete for the playoffs, or you're trying to develop young talent, or if you want a lottery pick, so I think you see multiple teams do that nowadays.
Yeah, so that's all we had in terms of stats. Now it's up to you to kind of figure out, is the league watered down or not? from looking at just these numbers, it's kind of tough to really tell. I know T-Mac maybe is saying like, hey, the league still has elite players, just like they did back then, but there isn't quite the depth. Now, trying to find that kind of depth requires a lot of research and stuff that we didn't care to do. If you want to do that, feel free. But just looking at the highs and the lows, it's about the same throughout.
Especially after looking at the bigger list, when we obviously did the research, we looked at the all years going forward. I feel like the league really isn't watered down. I feel like there's just been some changes in, different theories in the way they play basketball that have made certain numbers go up and certain numbers go down. But for the most part, I feel like it's still good basketball. And, T-Mac might mention the year he's talking about, there were so many great players. There was really, really great players. But, I don't know, he's trying to say the league's watered down because Steph won unanimously. But it's not like going to the season, it was guaranteed Steph was going to win MVP. KD could have won MVP. Westbrook could have won MVP. LeBron could have won MVP. Chris Paul could have won MVP. You know what I mean? It's not like it was locked in that Steph Curry was the only player good enough to win MVP and there wasn't 5 other guys who could win it.
Right. And going along with that, I know we don't have time to discuss this topic, but I think LeBron's 100% right in terms of they should have the best player isn't always the most valuable. And that's been true for as long as I can remember. You take Steph off Golden State, they're still a playoff team. You take Chris Paul, especially this year, off the Clippers, they're nowhere close.
Yeah.
Without Blake and CP3, nowhere close. So I would argue that Chris Paul could be more valuable than Steph Curry, especially this year. That was kind of my argument last year in terms of picking Harden over Curry. But there's also something to be said to where it's a lot easier from going, and this holds true in just about anything in life. It's a lot easier from going from bad to good than it is from good to great. So obviously the Warriors are not a 73 win team without Curry, but they're still good. But he makes that extra difference to make them an elite team. So, I mean, it just depends on how you look at it. But I do agree with LeBron that it's not always the best player who is the most valuable.
Yeah, exactly. Especially, you figure into different situations, if you have certain pieces around you, they're going to be able to make up for what you can't do. But if you're in a situation where they rely on you heavily for everything and more than one thing, and there's not other guy that can step into your place, you're going to be more valuable to your team than somebody who's on a team that has a lot of good players that can kind of make up for some of the missed stuff by the other guy.
And that's kind of why I don't really like the NBA awards, because the criteria is so open. Like, it's great for debate. It's great for ESPN First Take, if people still watch that show. It's great for that kind of stuff. But I'm a big fan of the Sixth Man of the Year award, just because you know what that's about. It's about whoever scores the most off the bench. That's it. That's the criteria. With every other award, it's like, well, we're going to use this criteria for this award, and then we're not going to keep it consistent, and we're going to do something else for the other award. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's really difficult to hash out why people are voting for who they're voting for. So
exactly.
The awards are so forced, man. Like, I was thinking about this earlier. Awards are just things that people give you instead of trying to pay you what you're worth. You know what I'm saying? Like, no, LeBron doesn't. Who cares about an MVP? Pay the man some more money. You can't eat off an MVP award unless you're Brent Barry and use his slam dunk trophy for a nacho dip bowl or whatever the hell he does. He's literally eating out of that shit.
Yeah, I heard him mention that, I think, on a broadcast.
Right. So, but like, the awards are so forced. Like, any type of award, nah, dude, give me my money.
And the funny thing is
that not from an award. You
say the money, but the only one who's making money off these awards is the NBA with the sponsorship deals they're getting for all these awards.
True that. It's all a cash grab, man. It's all a lot of these things are.
Yeah. One thing I hate before we get off is the idea of ads going on the jerseys, and that's going to really piss me off. But we'll talk about that another day.
Yeah, definitely save that for another one because that's a good one.
All right, that wraps it up for today. Thanks everybody for listening, and great show, Parth.
Yep, John. Hopefully he'll be back next week, and we look forward to being with you guys next week and enjoy the conference finals.